All of the opinions expressed on this show are those of the hosts or guests and do not necessarily express the views of Pagan Pathways Temple or its affiliates. Welcome to PPT Presents, episode 20. Thank you for listening. Today on PPT Presents, we have an essay by yours truly entitled Witching in the Time of the COVID-19 Virus. I discussed the role of our ancestors and the role that they have in helping us get through this pandemic. Next, we have It Makes You Think with Cynthia and Howard Day. They will be talking about engaging conversations. It's a real treat. Make sure that you tune in for that. Thanks again so much for listening. We appreciate every single one of you, and have a wonderful rest of your week. Thanks.
You are listening to Pagan Pathways Temple Broadcast Network. Pagan Pathways Temple is a 501(c) not-for-profit organization out of beautiful Madison Heights, Michigan. We offer classes, community outreach, event space, and a library available to our members. To find out more or to become a member, please go to paganpathwaystemple.org. Pagan Pathways Temple, growing in the old ways, where all paths are open.
Evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Dee Dunn. I'm with the Pagan Pathways Temple board, and I wrote a thing today. I'm known to do this from time to time. It's kind of like what I did before I was in IT. I was a journalist. So I've prepared an essay for you all this evening. Now, this essay will be available on our Patreon later in written form. If that's the way that you like to consume your consumables, then we'll be doing that. But let's just jump right in. Everybody hear me all right? Okay, I'm gonna assume everybody can hear me okay. So, I won't be able to look at the, oh, there's Scott. Hi, good morning, or evening. What day is it? Alrighty. So, I'm gonna be, going away from the page that shows me the chat right now. So, just to let you know, I will get to all of your comments at the end. But I'm going to go ahead and just read this, just because I don't do off the cuff like Stan. I'm not good like that. I mean, I can, but then I end up saying some foolish shit, and we all know we don't need that. So, all right, give me just a sec here. All right, the name of this essay is Witching in the Time of the COVID-19 Virus, A Call to Action, by myself, Dee Dunn, PPT board member, podcast producer, and witch. It's scary out there. Not just lowercase scary, or a little frightening, but capital S scary. This is something we've never had to deal with, and so things seem terribly frightening. It's difficult, as a will worker, to deal with such things, because you still feel the fear, but you also feel the need to do something with that. You feel helpless. You watch as essential employees head off to work, most your friends, neighbors, fellow community members, and you say a little prayer under your breath each time they leave. Let me bring you some hope, if I may. We know that fear typically stems from the unknown. A possible coping mechanism for that fear is to educate ourselves about what is going on right now in our world. Unlike religious studies, however, there's not sages and saints to fall back on. There is no ancient text for us to interpret about pandemics. What there is, however, is information about history. We've had this. In terms of world history, a very recent event. We went through the same thing with the H1N1 Spanish flu virus. If you look back, self-isolation was one of the treatment methods. Also, interestingly enough, patients who were moved to small tent hospitals tended to fare better. Yes, back then the stock market tanked too, and yes, people were poor, and yes, people were out of work. They were able to rely on each other from a distance. They didn't have Zoom, they didn't have Facebook, and they didn't even really have the internet or any tools that we commonly use now. Refrigeration was still a concept that was far off for most households in the US. Also, interestingly enough, this does seem to happen every century or so. Some new big bad bug comes along, almost wipes us out, and then we rebuild. Again, it's our turn. There were witches back then too. They were underground due to society's tendency to put fear on things that were unknown. In Africa, there were witch hunts during the Spanish flu pandemic. Education, as we know, fixes fear. I'm doing my part, reaching out to those who are interested in hearing my belief system and what I do as a witch. The Course in Miracles said, love is to fear as light is to darkness. Understanding leads to a lack of fear. Again, let me read that again. Love is to fear as light is to darkness. Understanding leads to a lack of fear. Let's spread love by expressing ourselves. Let's show people our true light. A rainbow is not made of only one color, but all light colors and creeds are welcome. In my belief system, we come to Earth as reincarnated spirits who choose what era they come back in. We choose our lessons then, too. We choose our spiritual paths then, too. This is why, for some of us, Christianity just feels wrong or not as holy as it should be. It doesn't ring true. We chose to come to Earth now because we knew the impact we could have. We knew our skills and talents would be needed. We knew our voices and unique spiritual gifts would be required. We are here for this. We are prepared for this. Those spirits who didn't want or were not prepared to hang out for this left us. Mostly in 2016, but other years as well. As memified. I know it's a word now. Kenny Rogers dying in the midst of the pandemic was the most know when to fold 'em move in the history of ever. My father, Tom Dunn, was one of those souls who skirted out. My father, a practicing nurse, terrified of the idea of a pandemic hitting the United States. During the winter, my father became the biggest germaphobe I have ever known. He kept hand sanitizer and soap in his car. He would apply the hand sanitizer both before and after leaving a store. He always warned me to be prepared. To get a true, clear understanding of my father and his phobia, however, you need to know he had a legitimate fallout shelter in the backyard of his house in the case of a pandemic or another emergency. At the time, I personally thought that this was a place my father's mental faculties failed him. But now I understand. He built a fallout shelter. He regularly supplied the shelter with canned goods. When we went to clean out his home after his passing, we found 3 or 4 different places in his home where he had been storing and stockpiling canned goods to bring down to the bunker, or down the hill to his bunker. I never figured out how to get into the dang thing to clean it, though. He didn't leave instructions. So, somewhere in Jasper, Georgia, there's a completely stocked shelter that no one could figure out how to get into in the backyard of a regular suburban home. I'll let you guys sit on that for a minute. Anytime my father spoke about anything that frightened him, he reminded me he had a shelter down there. It isn't big, kid. I don't know how your kids will do down there, but if you get here, you're all welcome to shelter in place with me. It was a common sign-off for him over time. Another common sign-off was reminding me that he was going to die at some point, and I was going to be left to help sort out the bills and such with my stepmom. I digress, however. He's been very present at my ancestors' altar the past few weeks. Be safe out there, kiddo. I love you. Don't go out right now. Stay in. Stay safe for me. He started this about 2 weeks before the shelter-in-place order was issued in Michigan. Bless him, the old man. He kept me out of danger. Our ancestors are out there watching all of this. Some of them lived through the Spanish flu. They know what we should be doing, and they are always in the background telling us how to do it. My dad, when I was not listening to the spiritual realm, still finds ways of getting a hold of me. A random song on the radio, a news article that happens to find its way to me. That's him. He does this to all of my siblings, my mom, and my stepmother, and pretty much everyone he loved. We'll be bopping along to some tunes, and then boom, Dad happens. The statement is usually, when I'm with my family, "God damn it, Tom!" My dad played guitar and had a very specific style. If you heard it, you knew it. The songs he chooses usually have a guitar lick that sounds incredibly similar to something he would have played while he was alive, or a song we knew he liked. To summarize, we all knew this was coming, but didn't want to believe it. it wasn't, and we didn't believe it was this. We just knew something was coming. Well, guess what? This is the something that was coming that we all felt from 2016 on. Things kept mounting from 2016. Our ancestors do have our back. They're advising you now, and if you listen, they are telling you exactly what to do. Those random thoughts you keep having, that's your ancestors' knowledge being passed through. We all have those times when we sound like our parents, and you should pay attention to those as well. They are guiding you now, if you are ready for the guidance. Educate yourself about what is happening. Look sharply at every request being made of you. Whittle down the things that make sense, and then save the ones which do not make sense. Set them aside. Time isn't linear in the spiritual realm, and so messages may come to you well before or well after an event. Just take a few minutes, sit with your coffee or tea or water, and ask your ancestors how they handled this. They'll tell you happily. Your success is their success. I love you all, and we're going to be okay. I believe in hope, and you should too. It's out there, and it's all over. Share your art, your talents, and your feelings with the world. Be raw and be vulnerable, but for God's sake, please wash your hands, sanitize workspaces, and be aware of yourself. Thank you.
And now it's time for It Makes You Think by Cynthia Day. Subjects that are sufficiently complicated enough to give one pause, just enough to make you think. Hi, this is Cynthia, and welcome to It Makes You Think. Usually on It Makes You Think, I start off the podcast with my friend Fur. However, Fur couldn't be here for this podcast. Instead, we will be talking about how to be engaging, and we will be talking with Howard, who is a member of the pagan community for the past 6 years. He's a regular attendee at Pagan Pathways Temple, and he does the morning devotional along with the others at least once a month. His last turn, he did one on worry, and the one after that he did on being human. Howard is also my husband of 16 years. Say hi, Howard.
Hi, Howard.
Why does everybody... Never mind. I think we just did that for Fur.
Just following instructions.
Oh, thank you. But anyway, how to be engaging. You like to talk to people a lot, right, Howard?
Not really.
Huh?
I talk to people a lot in my job and in my office, and I run my mouth off a little bit too much at times.
Oh, I don't know about that. You talk a lot in the pagan community with people when we have like Sabbats and potlucks. I always find you sitting around a table with at least 2 or 3 people listening to whatever you have to say. So I figured Howard would be a good person to talk to about how to know when you're being engaging with a person. How you get their attention. How do you know that your audience is interested in what you have to say, and how you choose what to talk to people about. So this talk will be about how to be engaging. And I know one of the important parts of talking to people is also being able to actively listen to what they're telling you while you're talking to them, by their body language or by whatever questions that they throw at you in the midst of whatever you're telling them. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, we can start with eye contact. That's pretty important. And their gestures that they give you while you're talking.
Mm-hmm. Their kinesiology, their body language.
Okay.
Yeah.
That word.
Yes, that word.
Okay. Fine.
You can tell we're husband and wife, right? So yeah, people need eye contact. People that are interested generally give you a lot of eye contact. But I have a tendency to like stare people right in the pupil. And I hope that doesn't
that can scare people at times.
Yeah, I don't want that to scare people, because when I get really interested, I like zero in on a person. Mm-hmm. But not everybody is like that. People can be very interested, but not look you directly in the eye all the time. They may be looking off, imagining what it is that you're talking about in their mind's eye.
Sometimes you won't know that they're listening to you at all until you stop and they go, "Wait a minute, what did you just say?" Or they'll say like, "Why'd you stop?"
Yeah.
So, you just have to be able to read the person and get to know them, because not everybody listens in the same way.
That's true. However, you apparently have a way with people, Howard, because like I say, there's usually 2, 3, 4, 5 people listening to you every time we sit down. As a matter of fact, every time we go to the grocery store, people are like, "Oh, it's Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so. It's Howard and Cynthia."
Yeah, but that's only because we get into play arguments at the cash register.
We're playing? Okay.
I thought we were playing.
Yeah,
now I'm
we
in
play.
trouble.
We play. Also, at the pharmacy, they know us by name.
Only because we use them a lot.
Yeah. And our friends are pretty fond of us.
We think.
Yeah. And there's a lot of eye contact. Another thing I think is important to bring up about when conversing with a person is making sure that what you're talking about, they can relate to.
Yeah, I generally try to listen to what they're talking about first and then chime in. Sometimes they're talking about something that's just totally out of my thought process, and I'll just sit there and listen. Like when it comes to comic books and stuff like that.
Or anime.
I
know
anime.
Very little about anime. I still call them cartoons.
Yeah. Kind of an insult to that community.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
Yeah. Although some of the cartoons we used to watch were actually considered anime. But you have to listen to how these people are actually describing what it is they're talking about, and you can get a sense of how passionate they are. And the more passionate they are, if I don't know it, I will just keep my mouth shut and listen, because listening is a very important part of engagement. So
how the relatedness aspect of it, if you don't know anything about what it is they're talking about, how do you get it to be related to you, or how do you get your topic related to another person?
I just flat out ask them, what are you talking about? Who, what, when, get all that sorted, and see, have I, asked them exactly what it is, they're talking about, and then try to guess whether or not I can chime in on anything. Because a lot of times I can't. And so a lot of times I'll be with a group of 2 to 3 people. And they're jabbering back and forth. And I don't know if you've noticed, I'm not talking. Everybody thinks I'm talking, but I'm not talking.
You're sort of moderating.
Pretty much, I'm moderating and trying to figure out, have I even seen half the stuff they're talking about?
Yeah, that is a real issue with us, because in the pagan community, there's a lot of younger people. And Howard and I are both 58. We don't look it, we don't act it, but we don't have the same experiences that a lot of the younger people do. But we do try to understand and talk to and relate as much as we possibly can. Like anime, it's still cartoons to me, but it's a really big thing.
Well, until we tell them what we watched and what was considered classic.
Oh my gosh, yes, they've changed a great deal. I remember I used to watch an anime cartoon called Kimba the White Lion. I don't know if any of you have heard of it. If any of you have, you're probably in our cohort. But about way back when, in the cartoon, when the lion slashed another animal, you could see the blood trailing from the claws, and there was real physical violence, and there was just a lot of I guess just plain out and out violence in the cartoon, and they don't show that anymore, and they don't even make cartoons like that anymore.
Nope, that is now all considered to be anime. It is not shown to the general public. You have to search it out.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've seen an anime that was better than half the action movies I've seen.
Yeah, but the ones that they have on general consumption for on broadcast TV,
you can't
or
even
on
consider
cable,
them to be anime, really.
No, it's not the same.
No.
Yeah.
And if you'll actually take time to listen to younger anime, or as I call them, cartoon fans, they will let you know in no uncertain terms about the difference between a quote-unquote cartoon for general consumption and real anime.
Yeah.
And real anime does tell serious stories that would be not out of place in a multi-million-dollar feature film.
Wow, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Also, the I forget what they call them, but they're not comic books, but they're really big and thick. Something novels. I forget what they're
graphic
called.
novels.
Graphic novels, yeah. I really, really got into those.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to call them comic books, and oh God, the guy at the gaming store would just look at me and go, they're graphic novels. Graphic novels. We don't call them comic books anymore.
Well, these small ones, the small thin ones, are comic books. There is a difference. And this is what you get by engaging people in conversation and actually listening to them. And then you will find out the big difference between certain things. Like a graphic novel has far more text in it than a comic book.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, because I remember there was one that I used to read. I'm trying to remember the name of it. I can't remember. But it was something that I read. I read every single one. It was amazing. There was a long list of, it was a long graphic novel.
Yeah.
There were a number of books in the series. But anyway, yeah, definitions. Getting your definitions right when you're talking to someone and learning where they're coming from is a great way to be engaged in what they're talking about. You know, and letting them know that, yes, this is important enough for me to learn.
Yes.
Yep. And people also need affirmation when you're engaging with them. They need to know, oh, how would you put that? They need to know that what they're talking about is important enough for you to listen, regardless of what it is. If their eyes are bright and lighting up when they're talking to you about something, it's obvious that they're very into what they're talking about. And it's important sometimes just to sit and listen, because your attention that you give them is affirming the fact that what they're talking about and what they have experienced, or whatever it is that they're talking about, is important enough to you as another person, and that's affirming to them as a person.
We have to let them know by voice as well. You have to say, okay, I find this interesting, tell me more. You know, that's an affirmation. And sometimes when somebody has had maybe a bad day and they're describing their day and they did something, and, you know, you think, hey, you know, they were having a bad day, but they did something really well. There's an affirmation that the person really needs to hear. You know, sometimes just a good job, you know, really helps. And it doesn't matter what the relationship is. In my line of work, you know, hearing a good job from a superior,
or an attaboy,
you know, or an attaboy from a coworker is crucial. That can make a horrible day
that can
bearable.
Break your day. And that brings me to the appreciation and praise aspect of engaging people. Mm-hmm. Sometimes people just want to know that, hey, I'm a little special. I did something great, and I want to be acknowledged for that. And I don't feel that there's anything wrong with that.
Depends on how far the person takes it.
Well,
like a certain person, certain people in power, not just a person.
Yeah.
Take it a little bit too far.
What do you mean by that?
Oh, when they start saying, oh, I'm great. Oh, I'm doing a great job.
Oh, I'm the best. Oh, when their ego takes over.
Yes.
Yes.
When the ego takes over. And sometimes when somebody is going through that, somebody who's near to them in power needs to put in just a tiny little shred of constructive criticism.
I think that brings me to the concept of ego strength and ego stripping, because I believe that it's necessary for everyone to have a certain amount of ego strength. And I believe it's necessary for everyone to have that reflected back and forth and to receive a reasonable amount of appreciation and praise. I don't think it's necessary to tear people down to the point where they absolutely have no ego, i.e. ego stripping. Because then, how is that person supposed to get along in life when they have to make their own decisions, when they have to base their decisions on their own value systems, if they don't have enough ego strength to decide for themselves what they feel inside?
Yeah, some parents really take this over the edge. Just a thing I want to get off my chest about that for the parents out there. Don't ever tell your kids that they're stupid or that they can't do something. Don't ever do that, because it is going to wreck them beyond belief further on down the road. Mm-hmm. If they're really not doing something that you want them to do, just explain to them why it needs to be done, or just say, hey, I know where you want to go. Hey, you need to know how to do this.
Do you have an example?
Before you go. Okay, I have an example, and forgive me for going back into my childhood, but I had a father who I love very dearly, greatly respect, but he used to say this one phrase to people: yep, he can tell you how to get to the moon, and yet 2 + 2 is a challenge for him.
Ouch.
Yeah, ouch. Ouch.
So you had problems with basic arithmetic as well as I did?
I had problems with math, and what was even worse was my dad taught business math.
Oh.
And it
was so easy to him.
It was so easy to him, and when he tried to help me with it, he didn't really realize that, hey, I'm talking to my child. Mm-hmm. Instead, he would get on me like he would get on a student at his school.
That was not his child.
Yeah, that was not his child.
He needed to have an entirely different conversation with you than he would have with one of the students.
Right.
Especially since both you and I, showed signs of being, I don't want to say enumerate, but we have problems with simple computation. Mm-hmm. And I honestly found out later in life why that was. There's a section in my brain, in everyone's brain, that has to do with simple basic arithmetic computation. And I had a psychologist tell me when he did something that's called a QEEG, which is a qualitative electroencephalograph, because they diagnosed me for being attention deficit disorder. And part of that disorder was the fact that I was somewhat enumerate in that I couldn't do basic math. Now, I could handle higher concepts. I could do your algebra. I even got myself up to geometry, but I would always have to use a calculator because basic calculations just were beyond me. I could not memorize things. I could not, oh my gosh, and fractions were like the death of me. There were some concepts I just could not get, but higher concepts I got. And there's lots of kids out there that are like that, but it's not honed in on by many psychologists or doctors because they think, oh, the kid's just being lazy. When the fact of the matter is, maybe the kid simply can't do it.
Well,
and they need an aid, they need an accommodation such as a calculator. And I remember when my father was trying to teach me long division, he would say to me, "You've got to get this, Cynthia. You're not going to be able to have like something on your wrist like Dick Tracy that's going to give you all the answers. You've got to get this and you've got to learn it by yourself." Little did he know that, I would have a calculator on my wrist if I needed one when I got older. And that's all I really needed. And then I was able to progress with the rest of the class. And, I got into college algebra and I was fine as long as I had a calculator. But I digress.
Yes, you do. One of the things, besides ego stripping, which is bad, is the fact that if you're going to engage with somebody, you're going to have to keep your focus on what they're talking about.
Or at least be able to say, "I digress," when you figure out that you've gone far afield from where you started.
Yeah. Yeah. But ego stripping is bad. Don't do it. But if you're going to increase somebody's ego just a little bit, by all means,
appreciation and praise can always be a good thing.
Yeah.
Respect and distance is also important, because with some people there are some subjects that you find that you shouldn't broach.
Yes.
And that comes under the heading of respectful boundaries. And when a person says, I really don't want to hear about horror stories or horror movies because I don't watch them, I don't like them, and they make me feel uncomfortable. Or if someone says, I'm not fond of, say zombies or something, and you want to talk about the latest zombie movie, and they're getting cringy. And it's like, okay, that's a boundary that you need not cross with that person. Change the subject, because you have to respect the fact that they don't want to hear it.
Better yet, ask them what they're into.
Yes.
Let them start a conversation.
Let them start a conversation about their favorite movie or topic or subject or whatever. If you find that you've stumbled across someone's boundary, always give them the chance to say, "Okay, let's change the subject. I'd rather talk about this," and then proceed. You can still engage them in a new conversation. It's also important for people to feel that they have importance or a purpose in what it is that they're talking about.
Yeah, definitely.
Like you talk about work a lot.
Yes, I do. But what I do, I feel, is ultra important. I'm in the child support business. Children all around this state, they need the financial support that absent parents aren't there to give them. I feel that this is vital, especially with what we're going through right now.
Oh, yes, with the COVID-19 problem.
Yes, because a lot of times even absent parents who are there most of the time for their children, now actually they have to think, is it safe for them to be around their children, especially if they're a healthcare worker or somebody who's working an essential job? It might not be safe for them to see their children right now.
For their own sake, and sometimes for the children's sake.
Yes, so I feel it's important. Plus, we have a lot of weird things happen around our office, but I have to remember that a lot of the weird things that happen in my office can sometimes make people cringe or feel really sad.
I imagine so.
Yes.
Yeah. Which brings me to another facet of engagement. People like to feel connection and belonging in whatever it is that you're talking to sometimes. Talking about if you can make a connection with that person about your topic. And then they can come back with, "Oh, yeah, I can relate that to this, that, or the other thing." Then you're engaging in a conversation. You're not just having a history lesson about your life. You're actually having a give and take about two lives in ways that they relate to each other. And you're learning about the other person in the process. So I say all of this to bring us to an understanding that there are needs that people have when hi Kitty. Yes, you have needs too. There are needs that people have in conversation, and you have to wonder, what is this person need from me, or what do I need from this other person when I'm seeking to talk to them. And I sometimes go back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs with his whole theory of human motivation. And I think our listeners are probably somewhat familiar with it, with the 5 steps. The first step of psychological needs, like people need food and shelter. Safety needs, like they need security to feel that they're not at risk. And love and belonging needs, to let them feel like they're a part of something with other people. And self-esteem type needs, to know that they feel their own accomplishment, that they hold some type of prestige. And then finally moving into self-actualization needs, where they are trying every day to reach a better potential of themselves as a better person. People move up this hierarchy of needs, but people also go crossways. People also pop in and out. It used to be said that you couldn't get a higher need if you didn't access the lower need. In other words, if you're worried about food, how are you going to be worried about self-esteem? If you don't know where your next meal is coming from.
I would beg to differ with that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because there are times when, let's see, how would I put this?
Sometimes your feelings of self-esteem can sometimes directly affect how your body is even thinking about going and getting a meal. Think of a depressed person who has low self-esteem, and because of that, they're not even thinking about the fact, gee, I missed lunch. You hear stories all the time about depressed people who are not eating.
Mm-hmm. That's true. And that's sometimes the depression is because of a lack in love and belonging. Sometimes it's a lack in feeling safe. Sometimes it's a lack in self-esteem or accomplishment. But yeah, even in that instance, it shows that you can be on any level of the pyramid of the hierarchy of needs, and you can exhibit any type of need at any time, is what I'm trying to get to. It doesn't necessarily mean that if you're at one level that you no longer need the needs that you have at the lower levels. You may just as well have a need at that time, at any particular time, anywhere on the hierarchy. And pagans I have run into seem to have a striving for constant betterment. The whole idea of following the mysteries and doing the great work. It's all about bettering the self. The whole alchemical gold of that we're looking for, turning what was it, lead into gold, or?
Yes.
Yes, the whole idea of it is just an idea of actually turning the base human being into the best representation of itself that it can be, moving into all different levels of self-betterment, throughout their whole experience. And
here again, this is very important, to be engaged with somebody. A lot of being pagan is actually speaking to your high priest or priestess, or receiving instruction from them.
Or from your God, or from your ancestors.
Or from your ancestors, right. Now,
or from your friends, because sometimes they have constructive criticism, which is another thing that people need from time to time.
But you also have to realize that there are different levels of engagement. The engagement that you get from your gods is going to be a little bit different than the engagement you get from your friends or your high priest. It's going to be a little different, and it's going to show up in different ways. And you have to try to remain open to all forms of that engagement. You have to be able to engage not only with other people, but with nature, with your surroundings, as well. And this helps when you're talking with people as well. Look at the surroundings when you're talking to people. Maybe the person you're talking to maybe isn't uncomfortable with you. they might be uncomfortable with their surroundings. It might be a cold, misty day, and you two are trying to have a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And
they're uncomfortable with it.
They're uncomfortable. They may be all shrugged up and everything like that. And, it's only because it's cold and rainy.
And I'm going to feed the cats so they will shut up. There. Eat. Finally figured out why they were yelling so much.
Well,
It's their feeding time, just about.
They're only yelling because you fed them early.
Yeah, I did.
And you engaged with them, and they got you to do something that you really didn't want to do.
Well, I don't mind feeding them right now, just so they'll be quiet so that we can talk.
Okay.
Yeah, it's only 15 minutes early. So, engaging people at their level of apparent or stated need is important.
Yes.
Because anywhere on that hierarchy, people will present what it is they need to talk about. Oftentimes, people just want to vent. They just want to be heard. And all you have to do is sit back and listen, give them the eye contact, give them the affirmation that what they're saying is worthy of being heard, and let them know.
Questions.
Sometimes you can ask questions when people are venting, but sometimes not, depending on what they're venting about. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's just let them get it out, because sometimes the need to be heard is so strong that a person will start talking and won't realize that they've talked for 20 minutes straight without giving you a breath. And sometimes good friends have to do that for their friends because people go through things and they need to process, and some people are external processors, like myself. I tend to process externally when I talk to people. If I vent, because, oh my God, the things I vent to you about, holy cow.
Yep. And I'm more of an internal processor, which sometimes drives you bananas.
Yeah, because I'm always asking you, what are you thinking?
Yes. Yes, I learned to process internally at a very early age. It's actually difficult for me to process externally. Mm-hmm. Very difficult for me. But I've learned over our 16 years to just let you vent.
Yeah.
And if you keep picking at me and picking at me and picking at me, then I can eventually tell you what it is I'm thinking about.
That's true. But sometimes people process info or emotion externally. And sometimes people are looking for contact and recognition and belonging. Although I may vent to you a lot, sometimes I have the need to be around different people to get that sense of belonging with a group. I mean, I feel absolutely family with you, but sometimes I need other people to add to the family that I feel with you.
I am the same way. That's what's making this time of
it's like
isolation.
It's day 14 of our isolation since Governor Whitmer has said that everyone needed to shelter in place, and we've been together for 14 days and we're doing okay, but we miss our friends.
We miss our friends. I miss my coworkers. Mm-hmm. I like to think I have a nice home, but after 14 days of barely getting out of it, it's beginning to feel a little bit like a prison cell. And it's just something that we're going to have to endure. I never thought about the need for human contact.
That you needed it as much as you do.
Yeah, that I needed it as much as I do. Mm-hmm. And until now, I would encourage anybody who is listening to this podcast to reach out to your friends via Skype or
Zoom or Facebook
or something. Don't go through this alone.
No,
Please
you don't want to go through this alone. Solitary, I don't think is good for anybody over a long period.
No, and you do need to engage with people on a regular basis.
Also, people sometimes come to you and you have to ask, what does this person need from me and what do I need from them? But sometimes people will come to you with safety needs. And they may not state it as such. But you may get the feeling after listening to them vent that this person may be in trouble, whether it's real physical trouble or actual emotional or mental trouble.
That's how we met.
Yeah, that's true. That is how we met. I had come out of an abusive relationship after some time and then met Howard, and I had to vent a lot of stuff because I still had a lot of stuff to process.
Yes.
But there are times when you get that hint in the conversation that, oh, this isn't just venting. This is important.
This is a cry for help.
This is a cry for help, and this is where I, as a friend, can help. But you can offer help, but unless a person asks for help, they're probably not going to take that help. They have to ask. Unless you know that a person is in danger, a danger to themselves or a danger to others, you just listen. But if you know that a person is a danger to themselves or a danger to others, you need to alert the authorities. Mm-hmm. That's just the way it is. Because I've lost people in my life to suicide, and I have found out much later in life that people were in an abusive situation that I just didn't catch on to in all of our talks. That this person was actually living through a very abusive situation, and they weren't actually asking for help. They were just venting, but at the same time, it's kind of like a cry for help, and I didn't really hear it that way. I was young, what can I say? When you know better, you do better.
Yeah, sometimes you have to be specially trained.
That's true too.
Like I am. My job requires me to be have a little bit of training in spotting an abusive relationship. But this is why it's important to actually really engage with people, actually listen to what they're saying. And, you don't have to read that much into it, but there are enough sources of information out there where if you think somebody's in trouble, you can just put the question up on Google and you'll get an answer. And but this is why it's important to engage with people on a regular basis, mm-hmm. because it could be a friend's life you save.
Very true.
It might even be your own life that you save.
That's true. I also think sometimes people need, in their esteem needs, they have what I call refrigerator moments.
Refrigerator moments?
Yes. Sometimes people have refrigerator moments where they come to you with something and they say, look what I did. I have achieved this. I have done thus and so. And the only proper way to really come back is to say, hey, that's really great. Just like if it was a kid that had a picture that you had to put up on the refrigerator because they really did a good job. Or they think they really did a good job and they're really trying, they're really getting there. And you put that picture up on the refrigerator to let them know that, yeah, keep going, you've got it.
I'm so glad she explained that, because I was thinking, what does reaching into the refrigerator and grabbing another beer have to do with this?
No, refrigerator moments. It's when you let a person shine.
You put their achievement on the refrigerator.
On the refrigerator in your mind with a refrigerator magnet, And from time to time when a person is feeling down or other, you can always bring up that refrigerator magnet and whatever is under it.
I was about to say that. When they're feeling down, remind them of what they did.
That's right. It's important to listen and engage mm-hmm. with people to find out what their good times are. Because sometimes you need to remind them, And
you know what? Sometimes it's just good to let the person that you're talking to or engaging with, just let them be silly.
Oh, yeah.
Just let them be silly and telling jokes, because you know what? The best humor is the best medicine for so many things that go wrong, not only in your life, but in other people's life. And if you're just letting them be silly, just let them be silly.
Yeah.
And remember the jokes. Steal it.
Steal the jokes. Use them later.
Steal the jokes.
Sometimes people are feeling unsure because they're going through their own processing of whatever it is. And then my mother had a name for it. She called it growing pains.
Boy.
Anything that goes towards personal growth sometimes can be internally painful. Initiations are that way. And
Yes.
I can't think of a single time in which I learned something really deeply personal to me and important, that also didn't also carry with it some sort of sacrifice or personal pain or emotional pain that I had to get over, or physical, that I had to get over to get to it. You know, it's true. It's I can't think of a time. It's an opportunity cost of getting ahead of yourself, of getting ahead in this world. You have to, as my mother would also say, give it some elbow grease, and that's not always comfortable.
No, I know that in my life lessons came from my father, and my father would tell me some things that hurt. They really hurt. They went against my idea of how I was being raised by my mother. Sometimes they went against my ideas of what were moral. But, you know, now that I am older than my father, I realize that what he was telling me, although it hurt at the time, was stuff that I really needed to know. And that really started my journey for personal growth and made me the weird person that I am today.
Yeah, and you paid an opportunity cost in that it caused internal processing.
It caused a lot of emotional hurt and a lot of emotional pain.
Yeah.
And a lot of
introspection.
A lot of introspection and confusion, yes.
And
a
it's
little
important.
bit of therapy was needed, too.
Yeah, it's important sometimes to forgive yourself for that, too, because you're developing an inner eye. You're developing a self-awareness and an ability to be introspective in your personal growth. And these are the growing pains that, like I say, nothing's ever truly learned without a little bit of pain. But something that is personal to you, to the individual, it can sear into your brain the lesson that you have to learn.
Yes.
Yes, it's very
Definitely.
true. Not always, but many times.
And you know the hardest lesson that I think that people have to learn?
What's that?
Is the fact that sometimes their parents didn't know everything, and that sometimes their parents were more right than they could ever imagine.
And sometimes that their parents were wrong, and they couldn't imagine.
Yeah, their parents were more wrong than they could ever imagine.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that goes with everybody's parents. But what you have to look at, sometimes what's the most amusing, is the fact that some of the times what you thought was absolute bull turned out to be the things that were the most right.
Yep.
And the only reason you understood that is because you took that time, you actually listened to them, because you could tell from their body language and from the way they looked at you, okay, they're not just fussing at you, they're actually trying to get you to learn something.
Yeah.
And sometimes we do that with our friends too, and we have to do that with our friends and with our family members. Because if not, and I love to harp on this, you're not being human unless you are totally engaging with somebody. You know, really look at them, really listen to them.
Be in the present moment with them. Yes.
Got it.
And with that, we're going to wrap it up for It Makes You Think for our 20th episode.
Oh, wow.
Yes, indeed.
Okay.
I'm only sorry Fur couldn't be here.
Oh, well.
But
We
we hope that we've given you something to think about. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact Pagan Pathways Temple at gmail.com and leave any questions that you may have, and I can answer them for you. So we want to thank you, and we will see you next week. Say goodbye, Howard.
Goodbye, Howard.
Oh my God.
Goodbye, all.
Goodbye, everybody. Have a great week. Thanks.
This PPT Presents broadcast is brought to you by TechWitch Detroit. TechWitch Detroit for all your IT needs. Please visit us on the web at techwitchdetroit.com. TechWitch Detroit, we can help. You have just listened to a Pagan Pathways Temple Broadcast Network recording. Pagan Pathways Temple is a 501(c) not-for-profit organization out of beautiful Madison Heights, Michigan. We offer classes, community outreach, event space, and a library available to our members. To find out more or to become a member, please go to paganpathwaystemple.org. Pagan Pathways Temple, growing in the old ways where all paths are open.